On tonight's program, we're going to watch a video presentation that I gave this past weekend at Understanding the Times conference with host Jan Markell in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it was an incredible conference. It was all day on Saturday. We heard from great prophetic leaders, but I also had the opportunity to share with almost 5,000 participants the evidence of the indoctrination of America's children. Of course, I mentioned Ilhan Omar because we happened to be in her neighborhood. So we had a great crowd that really rocked. They were unbelievable, and it was so wonderful to get to meet so many people from the 47 states that attended, and I do believe it was 3 countries that we had people participating. And of course, if you go and watch the whole conference on YouTube, you will see that there are probably now close to 300,000 views of the conference. Hi, my name is Laurie Cardoza-Moore. Welcome to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, PJTN Online. The mission of our organization is to educate Christians about our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and defend the state of Israel against the rise of global anti-Semitism. Of course, we accomplish that goal by producing award-winning documentary films and television programs, and we broadcast those programs through our 22 global media partners in 200 nations, reaching over 2 billion viewers each week. And so we're going to hear a little bit more about that program, our Focus on Israel show later on in the program. But this week, this program tonight is for you. We want to hear from you. This is your opportunity to engage with me every week, to ask questions. I'm going to talk about some of the highlights of the week, some of the things we're involved in here at PJTN, and how you can connect and get involved with us as well. I also want to just remind you, if you have any questions through the program, or you can respond on Facebook since we are live. So send me a Facebook message, maybe make a comment, ask a question, let us know what you think about the program. But you can email us all the time throughout the week at comments@pjtn.org. I also want to encourage you to become a PJTN watchman if you haven't done so yet, to take your watch on the wall. We have all been placed here. We know that the prophet Ezekiel, God told the prophet that the watchman's responsibility is to warn the inhabitants of the city if they see the enemy advancing. And of course, if the watchman fails to warn the inhabitants and any of the inhabitants die or their blood is shed, it will be required of that watchman because he didn't warn the people. However, if the watchman or watchwoman sounds the alarm, warns the inhabitants that the enemy is advancing, and the people in the city refuse to listen or heed the warning, then if their blood is shed, it will be required of them. And that's what we are here at PJTN. We have watchmen. And for just $20 a month to help us produce more programming like this one, and of course our Focus on Israel show and the documentary films that we produce. If you're interested in starting also a local chapter to combat the anti-Semitism in your community, whether it's in a Jewish cemetery, a synagogue is attacked, or if you find textbooks or curriculum being used in your children's schools, that's the role of the watchman. That's the responsibility of a PJTN watchman. So if you're interested in starting that local chapter, or if you see anything that you feel we need to hear about, we want to hear from you. We want you to join the team. We have watchmen standing watch all over the world. We're going to take this time right now to kind of talk about the news in the week, or during the week. After I left Minnesota, I went to Washington, D.C., where I was meeting with congressmen and senators about the indoctrination of our children in our textbooks and in our curriculum. Those of you who are familiar with PJTN know that we published a white paper. We have been trying to secure a meeting with the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, to present the evidence and the documentation of the anti-Semitic, anti-American, anti-Judeo-Christian, and unconstitutional pro-Islamic content being taught to our children in our public school system. And unfortunately, Secretary DeVos's staff has informed us that the Secretary does not get involved in local issues with regards to curriculum and textbooks because that's not a federal issue. But unfortunately, there was an incident at UNC, or North Carolina University, or University of North Carolina, and Duke University that was receiving federal funding. And unfortunately, they were using the federal funding to promote anti-Israel sentiment to the students on that higher ed campus. And we have sent an email to Secretary DeVos's office inquiring about why they are addressing that content on the university that is receiving federal funding, when the content in our textbooks also, because of the federal government, because of Common Core, and because of Access Islam being mandated, we want to know why the higher ed campus and the curriculum on their campus is a problem and sufficient for the secretary to get involved in, but she doesn't want to get involved in the local level. And of course, both are receiving federal funding, and both have a detrimental effect to our future, future of the United States. So I also want to mention, you all know that last week I talked a little bit in the news about the U.S. State Department removing all mention of the Palestinian Authority. Well, we found a book that I want to just share with you that we found quite interesting and is actually being used in the public school system in libraries. It's in libraries, and we also know it's being used in public libraries, but it's called P is for Palestine. And this is an alphabet book that is being used for pre-K, kindergarten, first grade. And it's a letter to help the kids learn the alphabet. And unfortunately, some of the words, some of the sentences for some of the letters in this are quite disturbing. For example, I'll share one with you for the letter I. Those of you who know that PJTN launched a campaign to remove the anti-Semitic textbooks found a textbook in Williamson County, Tennessee, that had a quote legitimizing Palestinians blowing themselves up in a Jerusalem restaurant because they were waging a war against Israeli government policies and army actions. And we took issue with that book in our community, and that incident actually was the Sparrow Pizzeria bombing, which happened back in 2001, and it was the beginning, it's known here in the United States and in Israel as the beginning of the Second Intifada. Well, in this P is for Palestine book that is being used to teach our children in America how to learn the alphabet. For I, the letter I in this book is for Intifada. Intifada is Arabic for rising up for what is right, whether you are a kid or a grown-up. Well, the carnage that was created by the Sparrow Pizzeria bombing back in 2001, which launched the Second Intifada, unfortunately is being glorified and glamored, made to look like something sweet and precious for a young preschool child or kindergartner or first grader who is learning their ABCs. But that's being used. That's just one example, ladies and gentlemen. And I shared that book with the legislators that I met. I showed them the documentation to show them what is being taught, what is being used to teach our children. I would expect a book like that to be taught in the Palestinian-controlled areas, because we see all kinds of propaganda in their curriculum, in their textbooks, in their schools. But never in a million years, ladies and gentlemen, would I anticipate that we would see something so blatantly outrageous. It's interesting because on the back they have a list of the critically acclaimed comments that people made about this P is for Palestine book. And let me just read you a couple. One is from Literary Hub. It's called, the quote about the book is, fantastic, gorgeous, egalitarian, and multicultural. There's another quote from Washington Report on Middle East Affairs. They said, adorable, for the children in our lives as well as the children we want to teach in libraries and schools across the country. And this one, I don't know how it ended up in the printed form, But it's not so positive. It came from Fox News. Fox News said, claims Christmas is a Palestinian festival and that Jesus was an Abrahamic prophet born in a Palestinian city of Bethlehem. It should be outright banned from American bookstores. That was Fox News. How did that get on here? I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think whoever put that together was paying much attention, but I'm not surprised about that. But anyhow, that's just one example of the content, and it shows you how young they are indoctrinating our children in American schools with propaganda. I hope that makes you as upset as it makes me. It's why we launched this campaign to expose the content in our children's textbooks. I also want to talk about another teacher who is trying to raise awareness about the indoctrination in Minnesota schools. She came up and brought me some documentation while I was there this weekend because she knew that I was involved in curriculum. And she said it is now mandatory in the state of Minnesota to teach a program that is produced by Dr. Mohammed Khalifa, who is an anti-Semite. He supports terrorism, and his program that he has published is called Islamophobia and Christian Privilege: What Educators Must Know. This anti-Semite, pro-terrorist, Dr. Mohammed Khalifa, thinks that this curriculum should be taught in all Minnesota schools, and it is being taught. It's required. In fact, they're teaching the content of what they're teaching these teachers to teach the children in Minnesota is about Christian privilege, how it is white American Christians who they are targeting. There's a quote here about empowering Muslim student identities by teaching this curriculum. And it says that the goal is to recognize that Islam is not a religion in the sense that Western Europeans separated faith from other aspects of life. It is a way of life. It teaches children in Minnesota schools about Muslims that accommodate the aspect of Muslim life in school, including daily prayer spaces, prayer washing spaces, and Friday prayer spaces or fasting. So this is infused in the curriculum and school activities for children in Minnesota. Again, this is being taught by a man who is an avowed anti-Semite and is pro-terrorist, supports Muslim terrorism. So that's another, just a little bit of information. So if you're watching this program, if you're not aware of the indoctrination of our children across the country, it's not just Minnesota, it's not just Tennessee, it's all over the country. This is a growing problem. This is what we brought to the attention of our senators, and we're hoping to get a positive response. We have requested hearings to invite our experts that contributed to our white paper to present the information, their findings, and how egregious this content is. Also, I wanted to just mention that the United Nations did something that was unprecedented. They released a report linking anti-Semitism to the BDS movement. Those of you who have been with PJTN for a long time, you also know that I serve as a special envoy at the United Nations for the World Council of Independent Christian Churches. And for many years, we were hosting events about anti-Semitism and educating the UN members and their staffers about the connection between BDS and anti-Semitism, that BDS is fueling the anti-Semitism that we see today. And it's why we're in South Africa now addressing this issue within the Christian community. So that too is extremely important. And I just want to finish last week with our news segment. We talked about the University of Tennessee rock that had been defaced, blaming Jews for 9/11. Well, we wrote a letter to Chancellor Plowman of UT Knoxville, and she did respond actually straight away and sent a letter back assuring us that they are dealing with the problem. They have established some boundaries that they are putting into place. They're going to put some more cameras on the campus, and so we'll see if they're able to finally eliminate or address the issue. Unfortunately, we still don't know who committed the crime. There is no public information about that person yet, but we are still investigating the details because we want to get to the bottom of it. We were told that UT Police Department indicated that in their findings that it wasn't a student. I don't know how they came to that determination, but again, we are still investigating it ourselves, and we'll get to the bottom of that as well. So having said that, I just want to remind you all, if you, again, haven't been to our website to sign the petition to remove Ilhan Omar from Congress, we're asking you to do so. Please sign the petition on our website. We're trying to get at least 100,000 signatures before we present this to Congress. We've already sent a letter to the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, asking that she be removed because of her anti-Semitic views and her hatred of America. We have also asked the Attorney General, William Barr, to launch a full and thorough investigation into Ilhan Omar and her fundraising relationships with these pro-Palestinian, pro-terrorist organizations, Muslim Brotherhood organizations that she speaks at, she and Rashida Tlaib. So again, sign the petition on the website. I also want to encourage you to share PJTN, our Facebook, our social media, our website with your family and friends, and ask them to go and sign that petition as well. If you would like more information about the BDS movement, you can go to our website and order a copy of our documentary, Boycott This, or you can go to Amazon Prime and you can watch the film there. Bring in your kids, if you've got college students, high school students, watch it. It's quite entertaining. We hired a comedian to address the issue from a satirical position to help educate our younger generation. So anyhow, sadly, anti-Semitism is growing, and it is even growing in the United States, and it's growing among the Christian world because of replacement theology and supersessionism, which seems to never want to go away. Now, we're going to take a quick break to show you another way that you can financially support PJTN and our global mission to stand with our Jewish brethren against the rise of global anti-Semitism. Take a look. I want to take you to Israel in pictures and film. I want you to see how God's sovereign hand can be seen before our eyes right here in this land. That's why PJTN is offering a special anniversary package that includes a captivating new book and award-winning DVD. Israel Rising is a unique visual story of Israel's miraculous journey from unforgiving desert to thriving nation. Thousands of years ago, the prophet Ezekiel foretold a future time in which the arid land of Israel would come alive for its people. Now this breathtaking book documents the fulfillment of this vision, as rarely seen photographs from the 1880s to the 1940s are juxtaposed with recent photos of the same locations. This book will inspire and captivate you as it illuminates Israel's foretold awakening in a new and unforgettable way. In addition, you'll receive the award-winning documentary, Israel Indivisible: The Case for the Ancient Homeland. This inspiring film examines the many political twists and turns that make Israel the world's most controversial nation. From Abraham and the Promise to the issues facing the Jewish state today, the film examines the historical, archaeological, legal, and biblical foundations for the modern state of Israel. This is a limited time offer for these two remarkable resources for just a one-time gift of $70 today. Your generous donation will help ensure that PJTN stays on the front lines and in the headlines of all the important issues facing Israel and our Jewish brethren. So please go to pjtn.org today. As I mentioned earlier, I was in Ilhan Omar's neighborhood this weekend and delivered an incredible speech to an incredible group of people who were so fired up about this issue. As soon as her name was mentioned, people were standing on their feet to get her removed. So I hope you're going to, this video is going to run about 36 minutes. When we come back, we'll do a close to the program tonight, but I think it's critically important that you see the content of what is being taught to our children in our public school system and why it is imperative that we as parents, as citizens, take back local control of our children's education. Let's take a look at the Understanding the Times conference where I delivered my heartfelt message.
Since we're trying hard to stay on schedule, what I'd like to do is run a little film feature to introduce Laurie Cardozo-Moore, about 3 minutes, I think. And after that, then I'm going to come on and actually introduce Laurie. I'll say a little bit more about her at the time. Let me just say that my thanks to the I Am a Watchman ministry for doing our interviews during our breaks. They're doing a wonderful job. And I'm so thankful you all chose to stick around, or most of you anyway, this afternoon. We got a full lineup this afternoon. I think we're going to go right now through until 5 o'clock. Why don't we start that video crew behind me, Charlie and company. Why don't we start the video, and then I'll bring Laurie on too.
She serves as special envoy to the United Nations for Human Rights and Anti-Semitism, but her fight goes much further than that. Would you please welcome Laurie Cardozo-Moore. Laurie, it's great having you here. Thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you. Have board members who are tied to radical extremist groups.
So why don't you gather evidence against that board member and allow the mosque itself?
Laurie Cardozo-Moore has recently been acknowledged as one of the top 100 people that are affecting Israel. So please join Joni and me as we welcome her to the program today.
Well, here to discuss what's happening is Laurie Cardozo-Moore.
To me, Todd, the most frightening area is what is happening in our children's schools, in our communities. Many Americans are contacting us all over the country. We're working on a campaign in Florida. We've been to over 20 counties, helping to organize parents and citizens. Parents are fed up.
From the I-24 News Studios in Times Square in New York, this is Clear Cut with Michelle McCory.
We're coming after them. We will expose them just like we're doing to Ilhan Omar. She will rue the day that she did this. Now we look at a nation and we see what's happening globally, how the Jews are being persecuted once again. This textbook is totally unacceptable. It's anti-Semitic and we want it removed.
How will you address the rise of global genocidal anti-Semitism?
This conference was kind of all arranged and finalized some 6 months ago or so, and I said, wait a minute. You folks need to learn a little bit more about Laurie Cardozo Moore proclaiming justice to the nation, filmmaker, special envoy to the United Nations, battling for the Jewish people, tirelessly combating anti-Semitism, and with greater fervor than anybody I know trying to unseat Ilhan Omar. Welcome, Laurie Cardozo Moore.
Look at them. Look at you. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Did you hear that, Ilhan Omar? You will rue the day you quoted those anti-Semitic statements. We will not stand by. God bless you all. You know, I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell everybody, you would not believe Minnesota. We're all out here in the country saying, how the heck did Ilhan Omar get elected? Where was everybody? Well, we all know now. The rest is history. But thank God that you're here. And Jan, thank you so much for hosting me and inviting me to be here with all of you. Okay, so I have 30 minutes, and I promised I would stick to that 30 minutes. So we're going to talk about what's going on and how you can get involved. You guys have been educated, you've heard all the scriptures, and we're going to talk about the rising threat of anti-Semitism and how our children are being indoctrinated in our public schools and private schools, including Christian schools across this country. So we have to be educated, we have to be informed. That's so critically important to winning this battle. This is, ladies and gentlemen, the fight for our generation. I want you to think, as we go through this presentation I do today, how God puts you here, not just here physically or in the state that you live in, but that God put life into your physical body. He gave you your soul and brought you to this place for such a time as this. We have been called, ladies and gentlemen, by Almighty God, not to sit back when we watch our nation being taken over by anti-Semites, by people who hate America. It is our responsibility. If you look across the landscapes of Europe, and you look at the cemeteries where our soldiers are buried, what do you see lining the landscape? Crosses, and what else? Magen Davids. Jews and Christians who've been fighting this battle together. And this battle is important in our generation as well. So let's go ahead and pull up the slide, because we're going to go through, I want to show you just what your children are being educated with. And if we can have these slides come up on the screens in front of me as well, so I can see them down here. As you know, our mission is to educate Christians about our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and defend the state of Israel against the rise of global anti-Semitism. We accomplish this goal by producing award-winning documentary films, and we broadcast them to in over 200 nations, reaching over 2 billion viewers each week on Daystar TV. You all know Marcus and Joni Lamb. As we educate, we activate. And that's why you are here today. Next slide, please. So I want you to become familiar with CARE. How many of you know who CARE is, Council on American Islamic Relations? We have got a great educated and informed group. But this is a quote I want you to look at. This is by Ibrahim Hooper, who is the national director, and this was written in Minnesota Star Tribune. This is what Ibrahim said. Quote, I wouldn't want to create the impression that I wouldn't like the government of the U.S. to be Islamic at some time in the future, but I'm not going to do anything violent to promote that. I'm going to use education. Did you notice what he said? I'm not going to do anything violent. Wow, from an Islamist. Next slide, please. How did we get here? We all remember Yom Kippur War in 1973. Remember 1974, we had the OPEC oil embargo? Do we all remember sitting in odd and even lines, odd and even days to get our gas? Well, it was because the United States stood with Israel in the Yom Kippur War, and the Arabs didn't like that. So OPEC nations wanted access to our schools of higher learning because after they turned the oil back on, they were afraid that maybe our children would have the wrong impression. And of course, the Department of Education was started under President Carter in 1976, and 1980, pro-U.S. sentiment begins its decline. In our research, ladies and gentlemen, as we've been reviewing textbooks and content, it was 1982 when we started to see anti-Americanism creep into our textbooks. Next slide. Here's the problem. We all know Bill and Melinda Gates, don't we? Do we all know Common Core? Yes. So Bill and Melinda Gates presented at the Moscow Summit in 2006 the concept of Common Core. And they convinced the United Nations in their Globalization of Education initiative to adopt this concept, and that way the UN would push all the member states to adopt Common Core. The United States did. So, of course, who are they pushing Common Core through? Pearson Publishing. How many of you are aware of what Pearson is doing? Do you know that Pearson owns 80% of the textbooks in the United States of America? Sounds like they have a monopoly on our children's education, don't you think? They're buying up all the smaller publishing companies, and they're not changing the name. They're using the old name because they don't want us to know. Next slide, please. Here's a quote from Ronald Reagan. Many of us know, remember this: freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Next slide. Here are the focal areas we're going to talk about: anti-American, anti-West, anti-Judeo-Christian, the anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, Holocaust revisionism, pro-Islamist indoctrination, roadblocks by local school officials, and the unconstitutionality of U.S. textbooks, a legal perspective, and then, of course, the proposed recommendations for next steps. Next slide, please. Anti-American and anti-West, these are false or distorted content in textbooks, leads to the following, and we all have seen this. Our students are given the impression that America is not worthy of pride or loyalty. Students' understanding of America's position in the world has been distorted, and American students' perception of the culture and history is minimized. Next slide. Here is an example that I found as I was researching about Minnesota and education, curriculum. Here is an example of what I found on one of your schools. This is Lake Harriet Upper Elementary School in Minneapolis. Do you all remember this? This was earlier this year. Graffiti, anti-Semitic graffiti was spray painted on the doors of the school. Next slide. Here is a textbook by Pearson Publishers. This is an AP edition. Now, you're going to see some slides with textbooks from Tennessee, from Florida, but trust me, ladies and gentlemen, these textbooks may have a different cover, but they're all basically the same textbook being used in every state across this country. This AP edition is an objectionable social justice handbook in direct contrast to the founding principles of our nation as defined in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, therefore in violation of our founding principles. Now, this is a Florida state statute. Next slide. Here we have in this textbook, which is a McGraw-Hill, it's being used in Florida too, but around the country. In this textbook, the author states that treaties on international law are the supreme law of the land. Thank you so much, the Constitution. Were we not educated? There is no treaty, international treaty, that supersedes the U.S. Constitution. That's what we were taught. Next slide. But that's not what's being taught to our children. You saw. Here's another textbook. This is World History, McGraw-Hill. Quote, because humans rejected Allah's earlier messengers, Allah sent his final revelation to Muhammad. This delegitimizes Christianity and Judaism by turning Jesus and Abraham into Muslims and marginalizing them. You know, there's a school here in Minnesota, somebody just sent me an email about this, that they are now saying that God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is the same God as Allah. And that is what is being taught to your children. Next slide. So here's some of the Holocaust revisionism, the anti-Semitic, anti-Israel content that we found. And of course, we saw that it's anti-Semitic revisionism, which is stereotypic, Pearson's removal of Judaism as a world religion, anti-Israel revisionism, or the delegitimization of Israel, Israel's refusal to return land that God gave to them. And of course, the Holocaust revisionism, no Holocaust, no Israel, and the Holocaust is just one of many genocides. Next slide. Here are 3 other textbooks. Pearson textbooks are objectionable in methodology and presentation with regards to anti-Semitic and anti-Israel sentiment and Holocaust revisionism. Now, these textbooks that you see, one of them of which, The Cultural Landscape, was a textbook that we had a problem with in Williamson County, Tennessee, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Next slide. This textbook, the role that Judaism played throughout the centuries as the first monotheistic world religion, is minimized and ultimately eliminated as the Judeo-Christian foundation of the United States of America. This country was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. There was a man by the name of Haym Salomon who bankrolled the American Revolution for George Washington. In fact, in their final battle, Washington went to him and told him if they didn't receive the funding to provide the boots and the food, the resources for his soldiers, they were going to lose the war. And Haym Salomon stepped up to the plate. Haym Salomon, a wealthy Jewish banker, died without a dime to his name. But he paid to make America the nation, the great nation that it is. This learning outcome excludes Judaism as being one of the largest world religions. This is dangerous because this is the foundation of our faith. You can't call yourself a Christian without Judaism. Right? Who do we serve? A Jewish Messiah. So we have to make sure that what our textbooks and curriculum are communicating is accurate, especially as it pertains to our knowledge of history and, of course, our reference, which is the Bible. Next slide. Here's a world history textbook. This textbook delegitimizes Israel's historic connection to the land of Canaan, the Promised Land, later named Israel. The use of the name Palestine is not historical ignorance, but rather a concerted effort to remove all traces of Jewish ties to the land. According to the author, Abraham, the founder of the Hebrews, migrated his family to Palestine. What? He came from Ur of the Chaldees, and where did he go? To Canaan. There was no Palestine, because when did Palestine enter the narrative in history? After the Romans. I heard that out there, my history buffs. Then we have Moses upon leaving Egypt. When he led his people back to Palestine without ever setting foot in the Promised Land. Palestine after Egypt? No, we still haven't gotten to the Roman period. But you see how they're manipulating the text of the books, the curriculum to teach our children, and this is being implanted. Next slide. Here's another textbook. The example below illustrates classic Islamist Holocaust revisionism and suggests that without the Holocaust, there would be no Israel, and therefore the land was taken away from the indigenous people, the Palestinian Arabs. And as it says in this quote on page 476, as the horrors of the Holocaust were revealed, worldwide support for an independent Jewish homeland increased. On May 14, 1948, Jewish leader David Ben-Gurion proclaimed the establishment of the State of Israel. Now, what's wrong with this statement? It makes it sound like it was a Jew who decided to declare Israel a state, right? But what happened 6 months before? The United Nations voted to what? Partition. The United Nations voted to establish the State of Israel. On page 559, quote, in 1948, 5 Arab nations invaded the newly independent Israel and were defeated. Next slide. Here's some pro-Islamist indoctrination. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is crossing the line into indoctrination and peddling unconstitutional content to our children. The writing, production, and selection of textbooks and instructional materials are primarily influenced by American Islamic groups and leaders. A majority of public school textbooks are purchased from outside of the U.S., and the perspective being taught is monolithic. Next slide. Here's a quote from Shabir Mansouri. He is a publisher in 37 states for Pearson Publishers. This is his quote. I am waging a bloodless revolution promoting world cultures and faiths in America's classroom. That's like Ibrahim Hooper. Bloodless? Do we use those words when we're talking about educating our children? Of course, Shabir Mansouri, who is the founder and director of the Institute on Religious and Civic Values, formerly known as the Council on Islamic Education. He's controlling the editing of our curriculum, our textbooks. Next slide. Here's another book, Pro-Islamist Indoctrination. Shabir Mansouri, as I mentioned, is the editor of the Multicultural Perspective of Pearson, and as I stated, published textbooks in 37 states. Next slide. Here's Pearson. You know, when we first did our research on Pearson back in 2012, Pearson on its website said their statement was to change the way America thinks. Now, let me just give you a little information about Pearson. Pearson is not a US-based textbook publishing company. They're British-based. This is their mission statement. They produce or publish textbooks for schools all over the world. But they want to change the way America thinks? What's wrong with the way we think, ladies and gentlemen? Next slide. Pearson Publishers, as I stated, is British-based. Their shareholders include the governments of Qatar, Libya, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. And Pearson owns, as I mentioned earlier, 80% of the textbook companies in the U.S., and it is the driving force behind Common Core. Next slide. Omar Ahmed, co-founder of CARE, again, Council on American Islamic Relations, unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorist fundraising operation in the history of the United States of America, who's involved in educating our children. We should all sleep better at night. Islam isn't in America to be equal to any other faith, but to become dominant. The Quran should be the highest authority in America, and Islam, the only accepted religion on earth. Next. This is what we experienced. Roadblocks by local school officials, and for any of you who've been involved in fighting this on the local level, I know you have war stories to share. Local school superintendents and school boards block tax-paying citizens' attempts to expose the K-12 content in textbooks pertaining to flawed and erroneous information about Judaism, Israel, the Arab-Israeli conflict, America, and Christianity. and inaccuracies and biases in information about Islam, Islamism, Islamists, and their worldwide influence. Next slide. We continue on, and we had an incident in Newton, Massachusetts. I don't know if any of you have been following what's happened in Newton, but there were parents and citizens who have tried to take back local control, and they are being stonewalled over and over. Then we had another incident in San Diego County where their school district, CARE, was allowed to provide educational resource material on Islam to teach to the students, and the parents, 5 parents, decided to rise up and file a lawsuit against their school district. And guess what happened? Next slide. They ended up, the Freedom of Conscience, in March of 2019, Freedom of Conscience Defense Fund reached an unprecedented settlement agreement with the San Diego Unified School District to resolve its federal lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the district's an Islamophobia initiative. The school adopted the initiative in response to the false claims by CARE that President Trump's election triggered an outbreak of anti-Muslim bullying. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what we have seen, and the FBI has reported this. Which group of people is being targeted with attacks? The Jews. Judaism. We are seeing an increase of anti-Semitic incidents, not just on our college campus, their favor, and told CARE, get your curriculum out of the schools. Next slide. Here's the legal perspective of the unconstitutionality of U.S. textbooks. The Establishment Clause of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution holds that a practice which touches upon religion must not advance or inhibit religion in its principal or primary effect. Next slide. In order for religious activity in a government forum to be in compliance with the Establishment Clause, the activity must meet the following criteria. It must have a secular purpose, its primary effect must neither advance nor inhibit religion, and it must not entangle the government excessively with religion. Next. Adolf Hitler said, "Let me control the textbooks and I will control the state." I don't know about you all, but are we not living? Has the model not been already established and now it's actively working in the United States? Next slide. Albert Einstein said, "The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who stand by and do nothing," which concludes, I'm coming to a close. I think I've got 5 more minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to just encourage you all. We took on a battle in Williamson County, Tennessee, back in 2012. We had one parent. Always remember the power of one person. We had one parent who came to us and said, "You will never believe what we're teaching our children in Williamson County schools." She brought me her son's textbook. This is a Christian family, evangelical Christian family. Her son was homeschooled. It's his first year in public school, high school. And there was a quote in a Pearson-published textbook, The Cultural Landscape, that legitimized Palestinians blowing themselves up in a Jerusalem restaurant because they were waging a war against Israeli government policies and army actions. We went to war in Williamson County. We tried to remove that textbook from the school. We went to the school board. And the school board decided that they would establish a committee to review the content in the textbook, because not only was the content anti-Semitic, but it was anti-American, anti-Judeo-Christian, pro-Islamic. Well, the school board, we mobilized a media campaign, and we went to go find the low-hanging fruit. Many people like you and myself who are already listening to conservative talk radio or Christian talk radio. And we told parents, FYI, do you know what your children are learning today in your belt buckle of the Bible Christian school? When we started running those spots, we were inundated. We had over 2,000 signatures from parents and citizens. and we needed people to show up at the next school board meeting. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that night we had standing room only. We packed the house. And you know what we told them? We told the school board members that if you do not remove this textbook from our children's school, we are going to remove you from office. And guess what? There were 6 up, and we brought 6 down. And 2 of them who decided, who we recruited to run, who are citizens just like you. One is a former teacher, one is a doctor. They decided to run. We convinced them. I know they're in the crowd here tonight or this afternoon. Would you please, Beth, Candy, where are you? We want to give you a shout out and applaud you for your efforts. Woohoo! That's the power of one. But we can't stop there, ladies and gentlemen. I have a booth out there. I've got 3 DVDs. We've got to educate ourselves. We've got to educate our children. We have a DVD special. I want to encourage you to go out. These are $20 a piece. We're going to sell all 3 for $50. But you need to sit down with your Bible study group, with your community, with your children, with your grandchildren, with your great-grandchildren. Watch these documentaries. They are historical. Even Dwight D. Eisenhower made a prophetic comment when he was liberating the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. And he told everybody, document everything you see here. Because someday, someone like Pearson Publishers is going to come along and try to say that the Holocaust didn't happen. We have to teach our children history. We are commanded by Almighty God to teach these things, teach the Torah and the X upon us. So, I love you guys. I know I've got a bunch of recruits in the room. I have a sign-up sheet. I need for those of you who feel as if the Lord is calling your name and pointing at you and saying, this is why I raised you up. This is what I have prepared you. I'm going to close with this. The Lord reminded me that when Cyrus allowed Ezra and Nehemiah to go back to the land of Israel and to go back to Jerusalem to assess the damage, Nehemiah went and observed. And he went to the leaders of districts in front of sections of the wall. Then he went to people who lived in front of other sections of the wall, and he told them all, rebuild your wall. And the Lord said to me, every district in every state across the United States is a section of the wall. Go tell my people to rebuild their section. Most people have no idea who their school board member is, or their city alderman, or their county commissioner. We have to go back, just like we did in Williamson County and in counties across this country, and rebuild our walls. God bless you, and thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you back at my booth. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed our program this evening. I hope that you enjoyed the comments that I shared, the information that I shared from the conference this weekend. And I want to encourage and just remind you that you too are watching this program and you're involved with PJTN for such a time as this for a reason. And God has placed you here and put this burden on your heart. We can't do it without you. And so I want to encourage you to prayerfully think again about not only joining this battle, but becoming a watchman on the wall, supporting PJTN with your monthly contribution. Our world is changing. You know, the thing that Albert Einstein said, I'll never forget, he said, the world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who stand by and do nothing. Let it not happen on our watch. In closing, I want to just ask you to please continue to remember to keep Israel and our Jewish brethren in your prayers. The high holy days are coming up. There's a lot of concern at the synagogues. They're beefing up security just in case of an incident. Pray for them as they're worshiping and they're celebrating these days that are coming ahead. I also just want to remind you that in Isaiah 62, verses 1 through 6, we are commanded to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, that those who love thee will prosper. And also, don't forget, if you have a prayer request, we have intercessors who are praying around the world. We want to hear from you. We want to be able to pray for you, and we covet the prayers that you pray for us at PJTN. And then, of course, remember, send me a note. Let us know what you thought about the program tonight, either here on Facebook or at comments@pjtn.org. You can like us on Facebook. We're right here, right now. And, of course, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter, but you got to go to the website to get those links so you know how to find us on all of our social media sites. Don't forget to sign the petition. That's critically important to remove Ilhan Omar. And, of course, we're going to close with a short video. Again, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. God bless you, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren and the State of Israel. We'll see you next time on PJTN Online.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, P.O. Box 682711, Franklin, Tennessee 37068. You can also support PJTN online. Visit pjtn.org or call 1-877-873-9020.
Anti-Semitism has reached epic proportions, and Israel is now surrounded by nations who seek its destruction. For Israel to lose just one battle would mean losing everything. As Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and Israel. PJTN needs your help to reach more Christians with this urgent message. Please visit our website to become a member today and order our award-winning documentaries. You must decide that you won't be silent. Sign up now at pjtn.org. God bless you, and thank you for your support and prayers.